This episode of Security Market Watch is brought to you by Horizon Summit.
If you're not wrong at least 1 out of 4 times, you're not pushing the envelope. You should be making big statements. An analyst never says, wait and see, time will tell, that depends. An analyst has to have an opinion and take a stand. Own up to it when you are wrong, but the rest of the time you're making good calls 75% of the time. That's a pretty good record.
If you were to buy one product, hold another product, and get rid of a product, what would those 3 products be? Welcome to this episode of Security Market Watch. This is where you come to listen to the stories of CEOs, founders, and the people who make the world go around. So, my guest today, very special friend of the show, and everybody knows he needs no introduction. The man, the myth, the legend, former and first Gartner security analyst, and now the co-founder and CEO of IT Harvest, Richard Stiennon. Richard, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much, Josh. It's been great.
All right. I've been looking forward to this because every other show that we've done, every other episode that you and I have recorded, and pretty much what you hear on most podcasts in the cybersecurity space, I don't know why I put those in air quotes, in the cybersecurity space, really, are focused either on products or services or a topic in tech. And I know that these are things that you can talk endlessly about, being an industry analyst. And I think that once you're an industry analyst, you're always an industry analyst. But, this is a little bit different today. And it's very special because I'm curious, and I'm sure others are also curious, about Richard Stiennon. They want to know who you are. I would like to get to know you better. And hopefully in the next 20 to 30 minutes or so, everyone's going to listen to this. Your existing customers, the people who know you, the people who don't know you, and who will know you better after this show. We'll get something out of it, and maybe we'll know something more about you that we didn't know before, right? So this is an opportunity to get to know your story and to connect with an audience that maybe we have not connected with before. So with that, I want to talk about your book, Curmudgeon, because I've always been really intrigued by that title. Now, the curmudgeon, what is a curmudgeon for those who do not know? And does that really fit your persona? Is that something that you've embraced?
Yeah, so it actually doesn't fit my persona because a curmudgeon is typically thought of as a grumpy, older person, typically male, who is, just negative about everything. And that's not me at all. But the title came from that is associated with industry analysts, and in particular, Ken McGee at Gartner would teach the curmudgeon class for new analysts just coming into Gartner. And it's an hour lecture, but some really valuable things that he taught us. There were things like, if you're not wrong at least 1 out of 4 times, you're not pushing the envelope. You should be making big statements. An analyst never says, wait and see, time will tell, that depends. An analyst has to have an opinion and take a stand. And that's when you set yourself up for being wrong. You've got to learn to do that. So that's where the title came from.
So you're encouraging others who want to get into industry analysis to be at least 25% wrong and loud.
Exactly.
Yes.
And own up to it, when you are wrong. But the rest of the time, you're making, good calls 75% of the time. That's a pretty good record.
Yeah. 70. I wish I was correct 75% of the time. That would be really great for my relationship, But
yeah, good point.
Yeah, no, she's wrong. She's wrong 0% of the time, and it seems like I'm wrong 100% of the time.
That's just the male human condition.
All right. So for women who are not in the industry analysis business, nature is on your side. You know what? I'm going to get a lot of heat for saying that. I'm not trying to put anybody into a box, but do with it as you wish. All right. So what was your what were the early days like before you worked for Gartner, before you got into industry analysis? What were some of the main motivations that maybe pushed you in that direction?
Well, I've always been motivated by grandiose visions, right? As a matter of fact, I wanted to be Elon Musk before he was born, right? I was 12 when I decided that space was it. And it turns out a lot of people in my generation thought that space was the future. NASA was telling us by 1984 we would be living on the moon. We'd have a permanent base. You could go to college, study aerospace, get a job, and go to the moon. So I went to college, got an aerospace degree from Michigan. And when I graduated in 82, there weren't any jobs in space. There were no rocket programs anymore. The space shuttle was done being built, but it's still flying. So I ended up in automotive. But even in that niche, I was striving to get ahead, so I'd start my own rocket company, right? But first I need to make $100 million. So there's always this entrepreneurial drive, like start a company. So I started a company called Stiennon Analysis, and that I did structural analysis for Pontiac Motors. And then, of course, discovered the internet in '92, and I created one of the first ISPs here in Michigan called Rusnet. And that led to security, of course, because we're online, and I joined a security ISP, a competitor called Netrex, which was the first MSSP in the United States anyways. And Netrex is when I got exposed to meeting the founders of Checkpoint, founders of ISS, so all these pioneers of the day. And eventually ended up leaving Netrex, going to PwC. That gave me an exposure to the enterprise. So doing pen testing basically at some of the biggest companies in the world. And when Gartner came knocking, I was ready and took a job with them, not really knowing Gartner very well. If you think about it at the 2000 timeframe, and I wasn't an IT person most of my career. I thought of Gartner as the guys who owned DataQuest, which was, a .com boom information source for everybody. So that was, kind of how I got into being an industry analyst.
What would you say is your God-given talent that has contributed the most to this path that you're on? Is it that you're an analyst at heart, or what is it?
It's not a talent. It's just a character. I don't know if it's a flaw or not, but it is a desire to just learn constantly, right? I just want to know about stuff. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a naturalist and learn everything there was about plants and animals and the weather, etc. And I've always been that way all the way through college. I'd spent all my time in the library researching things other than what I was supposed to for school. Maybe somebody would say I'm ADHD. I'm not sure. My doctor thinks I am. And that works perfectly to apply to being an industry analyst, right? And of course, the older you get, the more you like to yammer and talk on, and you can tell that I'm doing it now. And that fits with being an industry analyst as well. You just have to have a lot to say, and obviously, I think I do.
You do. Yeah, you have a lot to say, and people listen when you say anything. I follow you on LinkedIn. If you're listening to this or watching this and you haven't followed Richard on LinkedIn or social media outlet, trust me, he puts out a lot of really good stuff, especially if you're in sales and you just want to have a better idea of the market. Check it out.
Yep.
Okay, so is this the type of life that someone can easily balance with relationships? I know I haven't had the pleasure of meeting your wife, but I do know that she exists. Do you have kids? I don't know that much about your family life, but was it easy to manage everything that you've been doing, either for Gartner, for yourself, writing books? You're fairly prolific. Does that balance well with family and life?
I think it does. You have to find your way, and for a couple, you've got to figure out how it works. Now, luckily, Karen and I met when I was already an industry analyst. So right from the get-go, she was, perfectly comfortable with me traveling every single week of the year, and she would travel with me quite often. We each brought 3 children into the marriage. So between the two of us, we've got 6 kids. The biggest contributor to work-life balance is, of course, have the kids growing and out of the house, right, and on their own. And they all are. 3 are in California, 1's in D.C., and 2 are here in Michigan.
Great. Okay, well, at least 2 out of the 6 stuck close to home.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, I think just talking with other industry analysts, you can, usually even if you're employed by a Gartner or a Forrester, you can impact how much you travel and cut back on it. Just tell them, hey, stop. Tell the sales team to stop suggesting that I can speak at events or whatever. But you could also just go on the road all the time. When I was at Gartner, I was one of 2 analysts that spoke 50 times a year for clients, so paid engagements.
Wow.
So it made a lot of money for Gartner. And that's kind of what was a little bit of the motivation. If clients were paying $25,000 to hear me speak, and I was doing that 50 times a year, how many of those could I get to hire me independently if I left Gartner? And you start doing the math, and you go, it should be pretty good.
It's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Of
course, it's never been that good, right? It's the most I've ever done is like 20 in a year. So.
Oh, well, that's 20 more than than most people are ever going to do in a year. And when your time is so valuable and you've got so much to say, I guess that you have to really develop the skill or the reflexes, or I don't know what you would call it, to say no. You have to be able to say no. So what are some of those things that that try to pull you out of your focus, and what are the things that you prefer to focus on?
Yeah. Well, I've got a very simple formula. Say no to doing free stuff, right? And that is just unfortunate, but that's a good litmus test as to whether it's worth your time and how much the people want you there. But, you still have to be speaking often. You still have to be on podcasts. And so I just try and strike a balance, right? And if I won't speak at an event that's, sponsored by vendors, right? Because, somebody's getting paid a lot of money for that event, and it better be the speakers. And that's easy to do nowadays because there's so many people willing to speak for free. And, more power to them. It's just, but what are you doing?
Yeah, it has to work out for both parties, or else you're just the value has to be there for everyone, or else somebody's gonna wake up one morning and scratch it and go, that didn't really work out for me that well, did it? You don't want to do that.
I had to pay for my travel and get a hotel, and it adds up fast.
It better be worth it.
Right.
Mm-hmm. All right, so Richard, what are you into? Your hobbies. I know this isn't an interview, but it's an interview question. At least it's not a typical interview. But what are you into?
Yeah, so obviously I'm into reading, so that's probably my favorite pastime, and that means finding and acquiring books as well. I'm not quite a collector. When COVID started, I just happened to have traded in my electric guitar for a keyboard. So I play piano, and I've been taking lessons since COVID, and it's just a joy for me to constantly do that. And then last fall, I decided, I'm not getting any younger, and all these thoughts of a future where I retire to a farm and have horses probably isn't going to happen anytime soon, or when I do, I'll be too old and decrepit to ride horses. So I started riding horses again. So on the weekends, I have horseback riding lessons. And that gets me
Is
moving, makes my family happy, my kids happy that I'm getting some exercise.
is that of the equestrian nature? You're doing the jumps and that kind of thing, or is it just sort of a leisurely horse ride through the woods?
No, it's more equestrian, but it's very, very basic, right? So I'm still learning how to signal the horse to get it to lead with the right foot, how to get it to pivot on the front or hind quarters, stuff like that. It would be things that you would learn the fundamentals of before you started showing. And I'm just doing it so I can communicate with a horse. And it's fascinating to discover that there's a language, and the trainers already taught the horse the language. And now when there's a student, they have to teach a student to speak the same language that they taught the horse. And it's a fascinating process.
It's like Caesar Milan. He says the trick is not to train the dog; it's to train the human.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Wow, Richard Stiennon, the horse whisperer. I love it. That's great. I never would have guessed. I mean,
No, I rode horses in, well, when I was a kid, we had a horse on the farm, but I don't have many memories of riding it. But by the time I was 19, I was working in the shipyards in northern Wisconsin as a welder, and I was working the second shift, so start 2 p.m. to whenever in the morning. So I had all this time in the morning to go horseback riding in northern Wisconsin. So I had a lesson every single day all summer long. So it got pretty good.
are you still out in Wisconsin?
No, I moved to Michigan shortly after that.
Okay, yeah, you did mention
Yeah.
this. So you got 2 kids in Michigan. Yeah, I wasn't quite a cheesehead, but I was an approximate cheesehead. I lived in Minnesota for some time. Now I'm in Brooklyn.
Okay,
Hey, shout
yeah.
out to Brooklyn. If anybody's in Brooklyn, New York, hit me up. We'll grab a cup of coffee or a slice of pizza. But I love it out there. I love the Midwest. And do you ever get back out there at all? Do you have any roots still out there?
Yeah. All my family is still in Wisconsin, so I go back there fairly often. Lots of
Great.
nephews and nieces. Yeah.
Awesome. Excellent. All right, so let's pivot a little bit to IT Harvest. I don't want to say too much about the product. It's a great product. If you are interested in checking it out and you're watching this or listening, go check it out. But you can't really separate the founder from the product. So in order to get to know you a little bit better, we do have to talk about the product a little bit. So what was that shift like, going from the industry analyst to founding your own tech startup? I mean, that
Yeah.
is quite a shift. Why the shift? What was the thing that made you feel like you were the one to do it? You were qualified to do it, and if nobody else, why? It was meant to be you.
Yep. Well, if you think about it, I actually started IT Harvest in 2005 with the exact same plan that we've executed on, which was to create a web-based portal. We used to call them portals. And people could subscribe and get access to all of our data. And I built the whole process, and I probably built the entire database 3 or 4 times over 17 years. And life would get in the way, or we have surprise tax bills come in, and I'd have to take a job. So you see on my resume or LinkedIn that I was chief marketing officer for a little company called Fortinet, or I went to work at Webroot or Blanco. But this final time that I started to dig back into all the vendors, finding them, counting them, categorizing them, getting additional data about them, started in order to put together the Security Yearbook. So Security Yearbook is now in its 5th edition. And in the back is a directory of all the vendors by category and country, and in the U.S. by state. And so the data, by the 3rd time I published that, the data was getting quite clean. And, we had all the spellings of all the company names correct. And probably the the key moment was running into Maximilian, who is Maximilian Schweitzer, is now my co-founder. And he has, remarkable technical ability to just take on anything and get it done. So, he was still in school when I met him 2.5 years ago, and he wanted to, get exposed to the security industry. So I said, well, why don't you become an intern? We only do paid internships because just against our religion not to pay people. And so he came on board, and I said, hey, now that you're here, why don't you take a look at this no-code platform called Bubble and build an app that will be as useful as a Google Sheet, which is what I was using at the time to get all the data for the book. Within 2 weeks, he had built something that was better than the Google Sheet, and I stopped using the Google Sheet and just used the app. Within 2 months, we had officially launched it, and another month later, we had our first paying customer, who is still with us, right? Has renewed twice now. And then we're off to the races. So the idea was a product that you could log into, and the first thing people compare it to is PitchBook, right? So you can log in, except it's only cybersecurity companies, and I've categorized all the companies. So if you want to find API security companies, that's a single selection in the filter menus. If you want to find all the hardware security module products out there, it's a single keyword search in our product database. So we took that to market, and all of a sudden I found out that I had a product. It's been years since I had a product to sell that wasn't just services. And we started to get customers, and of course we had launched in 2022, so there's still some economic activity going on, and it was a pretty good year. Got up to about $500,000 annual recurring revenue, which is great for an unfunded startup. And looking back on it, it doesn't surprise me. We've got a tool that people love to use, and gives them value and saves them money in terms of time that they have to expend to do the research. So it made complete sense that it was taking off and going strong, and it still is. But along the way, one of our customers said, hey, we thought you had product data, and we don't see any products. Typically we'd have one product per vendor, and of course many vendors have dozens of products. So starting last fall, we ingested all cybersecurity products from all vendors. And now we have a database of 10,500 cybersecurity products, searchable by keywords. You can do side-by-side comparisons and make your own charts to do that. And it's taken us into a new realm. So my initial vision was just having data, right? I'm an industry analyst. I love data, and we could sell to anybody else who loves data. But now we're starting to bump up against the reason for being for Gartner in the first place. So Gideon Gartner, when he founded the company, said that they were there to offer buy, sell, hold advice on technology instead of stocks. And he came from the stock market world, so he was thinking that way. And even today, Gartner provides that advice. You call up your analyst if you're paying them over $100,000 a year, as you do, for a seat, and you get access to research reports, typically the Magic Quadrant, which is a very limited set of possible solutions that you might be looking for. So it took a moment to look at how many Magic Quadrants there were in security and how many vendors they covered. Gartner only covers 188 cybersecurity vendors and about 260 or so products.
Out of how many vendors?
There are 3,865 vendors in our database, and there are 10,540 products. So when I realized that Gartner is not fulfilling its role in the ecosystem, right? An analyst firm should be making it easier for people to find products, should be making it easier for good products to get into the market, etc. And, they've got 10 Magic Quadrants that include Broadcom in them. Broadcom's bought a lot of companies, but nobody's actually going to shop Broadcom products, right? Broadcom's standard operating procedure is to support and maintain contracts with existing customers. So I think it's time for the industry analyst business to be disrupted with an old concept. Gartner DataQuest was started in the 90s and acquired by Gartner in 95. But boy, this is the time to be in the data business, because all of a sudden, as we're doing this, we were a year into having this product when ChatGPT was released in November of 2022, and we immediately started using it, and it's given us 1,000x the capability. We would have had to hire 100 people in the Philippines to do what we've done with all the data that we've accumulated. It's just phenomenal what's happening.
Yeah, I've had this conversation a couple times in the last
I'm sure
2 days, like maybe 48 hours, just about the capability of ChatGPT and really what it's doing. 4.0 is, to say that it's a new discovery and a paradigm shift in human evolution is an understatement. And I will die on that hill. Maybe some people will think that is saying too much. Maybe some people will say that it's overrated, but I truly believe that it is a shift in human thinking, human philosophy, the powers of the human being, and this is just the beginning. And so
Yeah.
I totally believe that it was a game changer for you guys.
Yeah, completely. So, for instance, the first task we assigned OpenAI was write descriptions of 3,000 companies, right? it would take me an hour to write a single description of a company. I didn't have 3,000 extra hours to spend on that. I couldn't train other people in India to do that, right? They'd be cutting and pasting as pitch books people do. And yet we could tell OpenAI, look at, we just want to know what this company does and a little bit of its history. And here's the funding data that we already have collected. And it did that. So a year later, when we said, okay, now go back and capture all the products, the descriptions, the features, and line it up with the MITRE attack techniques. It was amazing how fast it could do that. Just phenomenal. And the cost of doing that is dropping. Every single time they come out with a new version, it costs less and it's faster.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm excited for the future. I'm scared and I'm excited and I'm thrilled, and it's crazy. Okay, so I want to end with two things. One, let's play our version of kill, the other word, marry, right? You would call it buy, hold, sell. And this doesn't have to be perfect. People do not use this as buying advice, but it's just a fun little exercise here at the end of the episode. If you were to buy one product, hold another product, and get rid of a product, what would those three products be?
Whew. And we're talking security, right? Not
security.
pianos.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, not pianos. Yeah.
Okay.
Kurzweil would be mine to marry, by the way.
Yeah. I would buy Zscaler. I would hold CrowdStrike, and I would get rid of every legacy antivirus product out there.
All right, fair enough. So you're gonna marry. What is it? Marry CrowdStrike. You marry Zscaler.
Yep.
You're gonna do the other thing to CrowdStrike, and you're gonna kill every legacy antivirus that's out there.
I'm
All
good
right,
with
great.
that.
I never thought that I'd be playing that game with you, Richard, but you know what? Miracles abound.
Yeah.
All right, what would you want your legacy to be? After all this is done and you're off somewhere riding horses and enjoying, spending time with your wife and your kids, and life has quieted down a little bit, what is it that you want to have left behind?
I just want I want a sizable portion of the people in the industry to know me for my history of the industry, right? So I pour my heart and soul into writing the history of our industry. It's the only history, and I've interviewed 16 or so of the pioneers in our industry, and somebody actually said I was the Herodotus of cybersecurity, which is quite a compliment, and I'm good with that. If that sticks, that'd be great.
Excellent. All right. Well, Richard, we're at the end of our time. This has exceeded my expectations. I didn't think in my wildest dream we'd be playing Kill Mary on the podcast, and I didn't know that you were into horses. And last question: what book are you into right now? What are you reading these days?
I am finally reading one of the last books by C.S. Forster that I haven't read before.
Okay.
So I've read most of his books many, many times, but there are a few outliers that are hard to get. And this one actually tells the story of somebody who accompanied Columbus on his second voyage to the New World. But Forster, I think, does a balanced job, right? He paints Columbus as a syphilitic, crazy person. And the Spaniards, if he treats them appropriately, identifies that they're mistreating the natives in the islands. So we'll see if it's a good story or not.
All right. Columbus with syphilis. That is antithetic to what I read and what I understood growing up, which is great because I grew up in the Caribbean. Well, we're not a huge fan of Columbus, but
yeah, you shouldn't be. Jeez.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is the end of our episode. That is the end of the show for today. Richard, thank you so much for coming on and telling your story. For those who are listening, for those who are watching this, what's the best way for people to reach you?
So the best way to reach me is over LinkedIn. You can find me easily there. If you can spell my name, Stiennon, I'll pop up and reach out, ask questions, whatever. I respond to everything, even though sometimes it's, no, I do not want any coaching advice.
Yeah, so stay away from do not bombard Richard with asking for free stuff and coaching advice and all that. He's a
or
busy
lead gen.
guy.
Or
Yeah,
don't
lead gen.
I don't need lead gen. I need sales. So
yes.
don't bring me leads. I already know exactly who I want to sell to. So
good. Yeah, you're busy. You've got stuff to do, and please, for the love of God, do not address him as Rich. It's Richard. Richard Stiennon, not Rich Stiennon. All right, Richard, thank you so much. Thanks again.
Thanks,
everybody
Josh.
watching, thank you for tuning into this episode of Security Market Watch. I'm your host, Josh Bruning, and you can find me on LinkedIn as well, linkedin.com/Josh Bruning, or shoot me an email at josh@bruning.com. If you need more information about the podcast, or you're interested in sponsoring or anything that we're doing here, you just want to support, you can shoot an email to info@smwpodcast.com. Richard, thanks again, my friend. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Josh. It was great as always.